Welcome to Believe in the Word with Pastor Dan Shunk. This program is an outpouring of the ministry going on at Calvary Chapel Chambersburg in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. Here's what's coming up in today's message.
The carnal mind is at war with God, for it's not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be, so then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. When you're in a carnal mind, a fleshly mind, you can't please God, and it also leads to conflict and war with others. When you're in the flesh, you're at war with everything that's good and right and honest. You're going to have conflict by nature of living for the flesh and living for self.
Samson's riddle leads to betrayal, his wife is given away, and Samson responds with fierce vengeance. He burns the Philistines' field with foxes, and when they retaliate, the conflict escalates. Yet even through Samson's anger and personal revenge, God is beginning to break the oppression of the Philistines over Israel. Samson is unpredictable, emotional, and flawed, but the Spirit of the Lord still comes upon him. His strength was meant for deliverance, but his motives were often self-centered. Let's join Pastor Dan in Judges chapter 14 as he continues his message, Samson chose to live for lust.
His anger here comes up, but the Spirit of the Lord was upon him. And I'll say this, I think, later on as well. But remember, we've discussed this all the way through the book of Joshua and Judges. It is God's declared will that all of these Canaanites and Philistines in the land, judgment is upon them, and it is time, in accordance with God's will, to take them out. We've gone through that ad nauseum. This isn't, when they're taking out a Canaanite city or a Philistine city, it's not of their own will, it's God's will. It's clearly defined. So interesting that it does say the Spirit of the Lord came upon him to do that, to take out these certain Philistines in Ashkelon. So that's why I believe we see the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. Now, his motivation for doing it is all wrong. He's doing it to pay a debt. On Sunday mornings, we've been in 1 Corinthians, and we're going to see that Samson in heaven will not get any reward for taking out these Philistines. He did it out of the wrong motivation. He did it to satisfy his own lust revenge. And it wasn't to please God. It wasn't as if, dear Lord, I know this is your will to rid the Canaanites in this land and the Philistines. No, it wasn't like that at all. And so although it was the right action, it was a completely selfish and wrong motivation. And it causes us to say, you know, even if we're doing something correct today, are we doing it out of a sense of honor to God and honor for other people? Are we trying to honor Christ and win people, or is it just out of some selfish show? You know, you can have people standing up in front of you at places like a church, and they can still lose their reward when they get to heaven because maybe they did it for a show. Maybe they did it to draw people to them instead of to God. And so it's all about the motivation. And this is a great example of seeing that. A right action happened. Some Philistines got taken to judgment where God told them to be taken. And yet it was completely wrong in the way it happened. So think now again. I mean, you go back, and I want to again just compare him to the story of Jacob, right? Jacob, just like Samson, raised in truth, raised in godliness, raised with a promise. And yet they both go so deep into their own lusts. Jacob stole the birthright, right? In Genesis 25. He stole the blessing in Genesis 27 from Esau. Everything about what Jacob was living for was to give it for me. I need it. I want more. And I want it now. Okay, all right, you get the point. But both of them had that same lifestyle of, I'm looking out for number one. I need it. I want it. And if somebody challenges him, man, you're going to see my anger and I'm going to come at you. And that's how both of them were living, just to fill their own lusts. Jacob was in the same boat as Samson. And I'm going to just continue to compare them as we go through. But chapter 15 takes us to our third point, okay? After you're drawn away of your own lust, what does the carnal Christian do next? It turns into nothing but a life of conflict. And we've already begun to see that here in chapter 14. His own selfishness, his own lust that he's going after are causing problems with others. And that's our third point, is that the carnal Christian life ends up getting into the stage of just petty revenge. And you're always trying to justify yourself. No, I did it for the right reasons. I deserve to whatever. it goes beyond just I'm lusting, and it goes on to the point of, oh, you don't like it? Oh, there's conflict with you? Well, let me tell you more. And just the conflict that ensues. And that's what chapter 15 is all about. His life in chapter 15 is going to seem so repetitive to you. And I think it's like that for a reason. I really believe that this whole short little chapter 15 is a repetitive chapter to make that point. It's going to make the point. How petty is this constant back and forth? It is. It's just constant back and forth. Constant conflict, and yet at every stage of this tit for tat, Samson's going to feel like, well, I was justified in doing what I did to them. And then they get him back, and gotta get puffed up again, get him back. And it's just this constant petty revenge. Take a look at this. It's a short little chapter 15. Maybe we can blast through this kind of quick. Chapter 15, verse 1. But it came to pass within a while after, in the time of the wheat harvest, so we're in about June right now, of the time of the year, Samson visited his wife with a goat, and he said, I will go in to my wife, that's talking about adult relations, into the chamber, but her father would not allow him to go in. And in verse 2, her father said, I truly thought that you had utterly hated her, therefore I gave her to your best man. Is not her younger sister fairer than she? Take her, I pray thee, instead of her. So the wife's father assumed that Samson abandoned her, and she remarried. She moved on. And so this father is trying to appease Samson, like, whoa, calm down, we can fix this. There's another sister here, So it sounds just like Jacob, right? In the story of Jacob. And so Samson's mad. He didn't even know. Picture that, right? Samson abandoned her, went home, got mad at the Philistines, took care of the debt, left. He comes back after a period of time and thinks he's just going to have a natural relationship with her as husband and wife, and to find out, no, we've moved on. And he's mad. Think of the pride that goes into that mindset of, well, when I go back, she'd better be there, right? That is nothing but the flesh. He did nothing to cultivate this relationship with her, and yet expects her to be right there. That's not the way it works. That's just the flesh talking. She should be cooking my supper or whatever, right? That's the idea that he's got in his head. I expect her to be whatever. Where's the cultivating of the relationship? Where's the love poured in? It's not there. It's pride, it's selfishness, is all we have. And what is he going for, by the way? Oh, he brought a kid. Oh, it's so nice that he brought a present, right? Maybe he brought a box of chocolates too. It could have been. But he's just going there to have lust, right? He's in lust with her. That's all he wants. Verse 3. Samson said concerning this, now shall I be more blameless than the Philistines, though I do them a displeasure. And Samson went, in other words, he's mad, okay? And now in verse 4, Samson went and he caught 300 foxes, and he took firebrands, and he turned their tail upon tail, and he put a firebrand in the midst between the two, and when he had set the brands on fire, he let them go into the standing corn of the Philistines and burnt up both the shocks and also the standing corn with the vineyards and the olives. And PETA freaked out. They didn't like it at all. This is flat out revenge and anger. It's June, by the way. It's hot. It's June. It's going to catch fire real fast. But this is nothing but revenge. And then you start thinking, well, they deserved it or he deserved. No, everybody deserves everything. But this isn't the way somebody in the Spirit lives. This isn't the way somebody that's controlled by the holiness of God acts. Whether he was wronged or whether he seemed to have been wronged. It's just nothing but petty self-justification to answer his own hurt by burning down the Philistines' crops. Romans chapter 8, verse 7, talks about the mindset that goes into Samson doing this, right? The carnal mind is at war with God, for it's not subject to the law of God, neither indeed can be, so then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. When you're in a carnal mind, a fleshly mind, you can't please God, and it also leads to conflict and war with others. When you're in the flesh, you're at war with everything that's good and right and honest. You're going to have conflict by nature of living for the flesh and living for self. Again, in 1 Corinthians, we've just been through the first 4 chapters talking about unity and division. The unity of the church is because we all come together, not in our own mind, but it says in chapter 3, we have the mind of Christ. We come together in the mind of Christ, not in our own selfishness. And Samson is living in his own selfish mind. Verse 6. Then the Philistines said, "Who has done this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son-in-law." Somebody quietly in the background said, "I know." "The son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion, his best man. And the Philistines came up and they burnt her and her father with fire." And now they get him right back, obviously as unbelievers, always functioning in the flesh. So now they get their petty self-revenge, selfishness and justice, which is really not justice but revenge. The answer for burning down the crops, they burned down Samson's wife, who was no longer his wife. She was given to another. And so what do you expect from an unbeliever but the flesh and conflict, right? And selfishness. That's what you expect from them. But it continues. And it never stops for a carnal Christian, because in chapter 15, verse 7, Samson said unto them, "Though you have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and after that I will cease." Isn't that interesting? I just told you to set up this chapter. This chapter is going to seem super redundant, right? This cycle is not going to stop. Let me just give away the chapter to you, okay? They're going to keep going, and he's going to keep going, okay? And he says here, after like stage 2 of this petty conflict, one more thing I'm going to do, and then I'll be avenged. The flesh always thinks, oh, I can get the one up just one more time, and then I'll be satisfied. It ain't going to happen. The flesh never satisfies. It doesn't work that way. Sorry, I got so distracted. Let me just read that verse again. That was verse 7. Samson said unto them, "Though ye have done this, yet will I be avenged of you, and then after that I will cease." And he smote them hip and thigh with a great slaughter, and he went down and dwelt in the top of the rock Etam. So he killed a bunch of them and then left the town. Again, here he goes again. He answers the killing of his wife by killing many of them, raising the stakes even higher. It never gets smaller. It always gets bigger when you're trying to get revenge, right? Because that's the key here. The flesh isn't after justice. The flesh wants revenge. You know, when you look in the law of Moses, God says, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? And people look at that and they're like, oh, that's so mean. You know, that's really over the top. No, it's there to limit our fleshly desire for revenge. You punch me in the eye right now, I'm going to want to take your head off. I don't want your eye, I want your head. And the law, which is perfect justice, says perfect justice is eye for eye. And then John chapter 1, Jesus came and gave grace and truth. And trust me, you don't want justice, you want grace. We want grace, don't we? And so here's Samson's acting like, oh, just this one more thing and then we'll have justice. No, he's after revenge. He's after revenge. Verse 9. Then the Philistines went up and they pitched in Judah. Because remember, Samson left and he went to a town in Judah is where Samson's at. So in verse 9, the Philistines went up and they pitched in Judah and they spread themselves in Leah. And so they send their army basically up there after him. And in verse 10, the men of Judah said, why have you come up against us? And they answered, we're here to bind Samson. That's why we've come up, to do to him as he has done to us. Then 3,000 men of Judah went to the top of the rock Etam and said to Samson, don't you know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What is this that you have done unto us? And he said unto them, as they have done to me, so I have done to them. Have you ever heard of something as petty as that? I mean, I think every one of us that's a parent has heard that out of our child, right? Well, they did it to me, so I did it to them. That is as petty as it gets, right there. Now, Judah, coming to Samson, they're living in lack of faith. They're saying, Samson, don't you know there are rulers? We shouldn't rock the boat here. And they should have never lived in that much fear. They should have had faith that God was able to take them out, and they didn't. That's a whole other subject we've been dealing with all through Joshua and Judges. But then by the end of verse 11, we see him say that as they did to me, so I have done to them. His sin has led him to this conflict. It's revenge. It's hatred. That's all there's there. This isn't from the Spirit. I think back to Samson growing up. I think, oh, give me that woman to marry. Let's have a wedding. Oh, this wedding day is so fun. There's smiles. And you think of we always think of the flesh like that, right? Like, oh, it's a fun thing. And the road, it leads you down into this revenge and conflict and disgust. This is where it leads you. To constant conflict, one-upping, seeking revenge, anger, bitterness, broken relationships everywhere you turn. And that's where he's brought himself to at this point. Broken. Everything's broken. Verse 12. They said to him, we will come down to bind thee, that we may deliver you into the hands of the Philistines. And Samson said to them, swear unto me that ye will not fall upon me yourselves. So Samson says to the men of Judah, okay, look, I'm going to let you come take me, but you have to promise that you won't turn sword against me, that you're only going to deliver me over to them. And so he gets the men of Judah, his countrymen, to agree to that. And in verse 13, they spoke unto him saying, no, but we're just going to bind you fast and deliver you into their hand. But surely we will not kill you. And they bound him with 2 new cords, and they brought him up from the rock. And when he had come unto Leah, the Philistines shouted against him, and there it is, the Spirit of the Lord again came mightily upon him, and the cords that were upon his arms became as flax that were burnt with fire, and his bands were loosed from off his hands, and he found a new jawbone of a donkey, and he put forth his hand and took it, and he slew 1,000 of them. And Samson said in verse 16, with the jawbone of an ass, heaps upon heaps, with the jaw of an ass have I slain 1,000 men. And it came to pass when, as he had made an end of speaking, that he cast away the jawbone out of his hand, and he called that place Ramoth Leah. And so he kind of unwittingly used the men of Judah to lead him down, acting like he was vulnerable, and he slaughtered the Philistines. We don't even know what happened to the men of Judah. They probably just left. And so, again, the slaughter of the Philistines happened in the Spirit, by the Spirit of the Lord. It was God's will to have them taken to judgment. But again, the motivation for how he did this was from the flesh and from revenge. Motivation is everything when it comes to reward. Just look up 1 Corinthians chapter 3, chapter 4. Motivation of what we do is everything. So be careful. It's not just about serving the Lord. It's about living for the Lord. It's about honoring God, right? Yeah, verse 18. Now, this is an interesting transition. We have hit the pit of Samson's life, okay? This is the pit. Verse 18 transitions in a very interesting way. It says, he was sore athirst, and he called upon the Lord. That's a great thing to do when you're in a heap of trouble. And he said, you have given this great deliverance into the hand of thy servant, and now shall I die in thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised, meaning the Philistines will come get me. But God clave a hollow place that was in the jaw, and there came forth water thereof. And when he had drunk, his spirit came again, or his life, and he revived. Wherefore he called the name thereof, and that place, yes, you'll never see it again, which is in Leah unto this day. It's just better than butchering it. And in verse 20, he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines for 20 years. This is a real God moment. Okay? Some people talk about God moments like God showed up, God used me today, and that's a God moment. This is a real God moment that never got experienced. These are the moments where God comes and says, listen, you've been living your life for yourself. Look how vulnerable you really are. if my spirit hadn't come upon you, where would you be? You can't even get yourself across this land without dying of thirst. You're nothing by yourself. These are the moments. I'm telling you, this is the moment in his life. This is what his life pivots on right here because of what comes next and because of his choice. This is the greatest opportunity to evaluate his life and say, what am I doing? Where am I going? And change directions in repentance. This is God's grace to bring a person that's been living in the flesh, to bring them low and to say, you need to think about this. You need to think about what you've been doing and give them a chance to reevaluate. When you see him here almost dead, starving of thirst, okay, do you see trouble? Or do you see God's grace saying, I'm trying to get your attention. Where's a bell? I need a bell. I'm trying to get your attention. You're going down a dangerous path. Think about what's important. And he cries out to the Lord, and he knows he needs water. If you had known who it was that was asking you for water, you'd have asked for me living water, right? You get my John chapter 4? He's asking for water, and he still doesn't realize that he needs so much more than water. He gets the water, moves on with his life, never looks back. When what he needed was repentance. What he needed was gratitude to God for what God's been given to him. God also brought our friend Jacob to a point like this, didn't he? Jacob living his whole life, stealing the birthright, stealing the blessing, running off to Laban because Esau's going to kill him. And even with Laban, Jacob lived his whole life over there to trick Laban. Remember the petty revenge back and forth between Jacob and Laban, right? Same thing as we have here, living for self-justification and revenge all through Genesis 28, 29, and 30, through the story of Jacob. Same story as Samson, same story. Petty revenge, back and forth, living for self. And then Jacob is going to go back home. He's burned all those bridges with Laban. He's trying to go back home. And on his way back home, he knows he's going to get met by Esau. He has to face Esau on his way back home. And he stops, and he has an encounter with God. Just like Samson has an encounter with God. And Samson thinks, I'm going to die. Jacob, too, burned all his bridges with Laban. He's going back home to face Esau, saying, I'm going to die. Same thing. And he talks to God. I think I have it here. Now we'll get to it in a minute about how Samson talks to God. And the question is, will Jacob use these opportunities to reevaluate their life? Samson doesn't. He gets his water and he moves on with life. Now, I think a lot of folks are used to doing chapter 16 relatively slow, looking at each of the attempts to bind Samson and him loosing. We're not going to do it in that fashion. We're going to do chapter 16 quite a bit quicker than that. Because again, we're trying to make the point of the whole life of Samson and the stages of the carnal Christian life. I am going to go through chapter 16 right now. Probably going to be a ton faster than maybe you've done it in the past. And chapter 16 gives us our final point. It's this. It's that there is a choice to be made. There is a final choice to be made. Samson, Jacob, they both have a choice to be made. They've seen their sinful life choices, and they've seen the problems that it's created within themselves and beyond themselves. Will they give in to God? God's trying to get both of their attention. Will they give in to God and repent, or will they continue in a sinful promotion of self? And as chapter 16 opens up, just after Samson's experience of thinking he's going to die, we're going to get an indication on where his heart is. And I want you to think about the opening of 16 that way. He's just faced the pit. And then chapter 16, verse 1 through 3 happens. Okay? So with that context, let's read the first 3 verses. Chapter 16, verse 1, Then went Samson into Gaza, up to Gaza, that's a Philistine city, and saw there a harlot, and went in unto her. That means adult relations. And it was told the Gazites, saying, Samson is come here, and they compassed him in, and they laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all that night, saying in the morning, Then, when it is day, we will kill him.
As we close our study on today's Believe in the Word with Pastor Dan Chunk, Samson's story continues to reveal a man driven by emotion, marked by conflict, yet empowered by God for a greater purpose. Though Samson's actions were often fueled by personal offense, God was still accomplishing his plan to weaken the Philistine stronghold over Israel. This portion of Scripture reminds us that even in the middle of chaos and broken relationships, God remains sovereign and his purposes continue to unfold. If today's message spoke to you, please contact us and let us know. Our phone number is 717-500-1102 or visit cchambersburg.org. To hear more teachings from Judges and beyond, visit our website and click on the Media and Radio tab for our full archive, or download the Calvary Chapel Chambersburg app to listen anytime. While you're online, we invite you to learn more about our fellowship and our heart for ministry. And if you are nearby, come worship with us at our new and expanded home, 5121 Coffee Avenue, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, 17201. Thank you for spending time with us today. We look forward to continuing our walk through the book of Judges together as we conclude Samson's story next time. This has been Believe in the Word with Pastor Dan Shunk.